Welcome to the All Joy Data podcast. Today, I'm very excited to have Matt Meyer with us here. Hey, Matt, how's it going?
Good. How are you, Bill?
Doing good. Well, I am quite knowledgeable about you and your life, but maybe for those that might be watching for the first time, could you just give us a little bit about who you are and a little bit about your family and your career? Let's start there.
Sure. Be happy to. So my name is Matt Meyer. I'm happily married with 3 kids, 2 in high school and 1's off to college for sophomore year. And career-wise, I've been kind of in IT and data since the late 90s when we started working together, probably 1999. So have a career spanning, several chapters, and now currently working with you at Alljoy.
Awesome. So the way I remember it, we first started working together. You were interning at the Coffee House. Is that right?
Yes, at the location where the Coffee House was. That's right. My first internship role, doing programming and probably even then quite a bit of data analysis and data related reporting work.
Absolutely. Right. And my greatest memory of that particular stint were the ghosts above the coffee.
We won't talk about that.
Yeah, we bought a coffee house, and we actually bought a building and turned it into a coffee house, and then eventually our home. But when we first started, it was anything but a great place to work. A contractor had it for years before us, and yeah, it definitely made noises for sure.
I may or may not have been scared when I worked there alone sometimes.
Oh my gosh.
We'll leave it at that.
Right. We're gonna get right into this. The crux of this particular podcast with Matt is to talk about the material selection process and the data migration. And I'm just gonna preface this with, we both worked with Syniti for a long time. Now we have a little company that we work together with, All Joy Data. But we've been doing this for large corporations for 20 plus years, many multiple go lives. And we've seen go lives that were very well done, and we've seen go lives that have blown up in other clients' faces. And a lot of that revolves around the whole area of material selection. So what we really want to talk about today is the difference between using a pragmatic and repeatable process to do material selection versus relying on spreadsheets and folks, even with the best intentions, who are trying to maintain those spreadsheets and sort of the pitfalls of that process versus the benefits of going to an automated material selection process. So let's get right into that. And I'm just gonna go to you, Matt. And can you just talk a little bit about the methodology and process, the right way to do this that will give you some sleep at night medicine if you're doing a material master conversion?
Yes, absolutely. So you mentioned the spreadsheet. It seems there's always a spreadsheet, and there's always a person behind that spreadsheet that has some elusive, magical, tribal knowledge about the data that only that person could ever have. And what I like to think about as the right way is kind of challenging that whole idea that you have to have SMEs, that you have to have intimate physical knowledge of the materials by specific material code, when really what it takes to do it really well and to have a lot of success is a different thought process and some discipline with that. Okay. And what I'm really talking about is, instead of really focusing on right now, today, the specifics of the materials that certain SMEs or partners know are the most important materials, if you put your energy into defining and building a repeatable process that correctly and accurately selects the data that matters, and increasingly has the capability of loading and validating that data, gets to all the right places for the target solution, irrespective of the source of that data. That's where the power is. If you can build and develop a repeatable process that works, then you can put all your trust and confidence in every load cycle into that process, knowing that it's going to determine the right outcome and the right results, no matter what happens to be your active data set at that point in time. Because that's the big thing that ends up happening and becoming obvious. The spreadsheet method might work great and be better than you would expect in terms of the outcome and quality for the initial load.
Right.
But then good luck ever replicating that again. And if you do, guess what? The data that was good and right before now has changed, because the business never stands still during the life cycle of an ERP implementation, right? The data is constantly evolving and changing with the business, because it's the living lifeblood of the business. And that doesn't stop just because you're taking a year to do an ERP implementation. So I like to think of the right way, or the best way to have a great data conversion and to get the right active materials, is to invest in the process, and that process centers around the right criterion for what matters to the business. Make a repeatable process with that repeatable criterion, and you're off to a great start.
Gotcha. And I'm gonna definitely differentiate between the process of sending the spreadsheet back, sending the spreadsheet back.
Right.
Right. Because I've seen that process in place. They repeat over and over. Yeah, it's not right. Right. That's the bad process.
Right.
But we have gotten quite used to and got some great result by using tools that we've intermixed into the process. And I like to get into a little bit of the specifics, right? Like, how do you get started, and what are some of the things you do inside of a tool, right? And we both came from a background, it's now called Syniti, was called BackOffice Associates back then. And we've gone over, I've used all the way from the Microsoft Access version of it, all the way to the web-based, cloud-based version of it. But it's a tool set that comes with a mindset. And if you could talk a little bit about that, Matt, and how that works with some specifics, I think it'd be really helpful to those listening.
Yeah, well, with the BackOffice or Syniti tools you mentioned, the crux of that is it just always provided a place where you could easily define and register repeatable rules or criterion for data transformation in a logical sequence, right? So the process usually started out, getting to understand from the business what materials mattered, why did they matter to the business, and how you would go about selecting those, from the source as a rule. And then you register those rules, you build on those rules, you test and validate those, and over time, that iterative process. Not asking, is this data right or not, but am I getting the expected result? And then how do you know it is? That's another key point, not just asking, kind of how to get to the right data and what that is, but then how are you as my partner telling me the feedback of, is it good and right and accurate or not? Because I don't want you to have to keep telling me that every cycle or every iteration. I want to also build in reports and validation that's inherent in my automated process itself, so that I know before you do if it hit the mark or not. I don't need you to tell me, right?
That's awesome. Yes.
And that's kind of, so the repeatable rules and the repeatable reports, right? Not just a full preload or a full postload report or even a delta load, but qualitative reports is attribute X, Y, Z, etc., as it's expected to be based on the validation, proactive validation reporting that we've been able to build. And a lot of times, a single data conversion target in some of our best data conversions that we led along with this methodology could have upwards of 50, 60, even well over 100 reports just for one target. Right. And those were all qualitative, accuracy, completeness, appropriateness kind of checks, threshold checks, et cetera, on the target.
Yeah, absolutely.
We were validating on behalf of our business partners, and we were doing it, with the click of a button every time we processed those data conversion rules.
Right. Love it. Love it. I'm going to ask a bit of a rhetorical question, but
Sure.
Folks need to hear this. So did you ever have anybody in the project, maybe from different, silos, come to you and say, well, this material should not be in scope. Why is it in scope? Or this material should not be in scope. Why is it in scope? And I just, tell me a little bit about that and how you dealt with the constant barrage of questions. Yeah.
Yeah, all the time. And it's almost always, from a very specific siloed perspective, right? I don't think, and sometimes it's not even for the most altruistic purposes, right? So like sometimes, your make partner may want that material excluded just because the bombs are a mess. and if that material is in scope, then they have to, create or deal with the conversion of a complicated bill of materials. Kind of a joke, but yeah. So the way to handle that again is through the reporting and the methodology you're baking into your practices. In one of the very first steps is getting kind of a forum and a cadence together, right? Like you have to have all of the key stakeholders with the different potentially siloed perspectives engaging in the same way at the same time around the same understanding of what we're considering in scope and why, so that you start the process of reconciling those differences. It's almost like a facilitated mediation, right? Or arbitration process, because everybody's got to come in advocating for what they want and only based on what they know.
Right.
And what they want is never going to automatically be what's best and needed in the big picture.
Right.
And what they know is never going to be everything that everybody else knows, right? That's contributing to the sum total of the project. And at the end of the day, it all has to hang together and be consistent, not only in terms of what's in scope for Material Master itself, but then how that scope hangs and maintains consistency with other data objects that have to relate to and integrate with Material Master.
Right.
So shared cadence with all the right key stakeholders, make that a consistent stakeholder group. You're never going to get to the right consensus and everyone aligned if you have a different representative from make every week,
right?
or someone different from quality every time you try to have a conversation. Yeah. And then one of the first orders of business in this forum with these right stakeholders is to just start by defining, like, what does material scope mean to me and why? Yeah. And what do we need to consider, even if it's not an active material right now? So many of the siloed perspectives that'll come into the picture for those conversations will be overly preoccupied on just what has to be manufactured today, or tomorrow when we go live, the day after go live. Yes. But it's so much more than that, right? There's key questions that have to be brought to the table and asked in those facilitated forums, and that's typically where we would come in and add that value or that leadership to the conversation. Well, what about something you haven't manufactured maybe in 10 years, but it still has slow-moving or obsolete inventory stranded somewhere? Yeah. Don't you have to care about that? Right. Okay, fine. We haven't produced this for maybe 2 years, but how long do you support customer or affiliate returns? Right. For what period of time may someone be able to come back and demand that a defective item be remanufactured? Sure. Et cetera, et cetera. There's lots of considerations. And again, then once you start to get the common understanding of why those different dimensions are important, you start to get the answers that gel into one consensus about what the answer needs to be. Then you need the tool as the consistent place to hang that. Don't write it down on a Word document. Yeah. Don't bake it into like another static material list in a spreadsheet. No, then you have to actually convert that knowledge and that consensus into acting rules in reporting that's in that conversion tool, so that it immediately becomes real and reflected in the very next mock load, wherever you're going to do that.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's great. And one of the things that we'll say back and forth to each other, is like, you don't know what you don't know, right? And that's why one of the tenets of our migrations that I'm going to have you talk about, which is functional knowledge, like functional business process knowledge, that I think was absolute key to our success in migrations was having. Not everybody in the team needs to be a functional expert, but you need some functional expertise in the room that understands both the business side and the technical side of data to be able to have this conversation and to say smart things to help them understand like why we needed to do things a certain way. But if you could just talk a little bit more in depth about that functional knowledge and even morph that into what I'm going to call your flags on the Material Master and how all that played together, I think it would be really, really helpful to those listening.
Sure. Yeah, the functional knowledge is just really important to kind of get the conversations like the one I just described, right, in these forums really happening in a way that's engaging for the functional experts. If the data conversations are too technical with no connection to what makes sense or resonates, with process folks or functional design folks as relevant, you're not going to get the engagement in the progress. If it's all functional and no technical aspects, there's going to be assumptions or presumptions about what's possible that might not be anchored to the reality of what's in the actual technical data conversion capabilities or process. So it definitely takes a partnership in striking the right balance all the time of talking about the technical details, limitations, constraints, needs of data from a pure technical perspective, but also making sure the only reason we're doing any of that is to support the functional and process needs of the target design and the target ERP system. And so you got to have that connection, that context present in every data conversation. If it doesn't matter for a process or a functional design need that we can articulate and know that we're dealing with, it either doesn't matter or we're not dealing with it appropriately if we're not making that connection.
No, absolutely. And that's what I would just, for those of you that might be aspiring to be a data migration lead or lead a material master, it would be really, really helpful for you to get a feel for the sort of the inception. So when it comes out of R&D, so like when a new product comes out of research and development, when it goes, into a forecast, that forecast becomes a planned order becomes a production order has materials that move around their logistical interface and network, their sales orders, purchase orders, raw materials, right? But to be able to talk to that and be able to have at least a high level understanding of that, end-to-end business process, and nobody knows it all. I'm not talking about that, but way more than, these are the tables, these are the fields, right? The best consultants that do data migration have functional and business process knowledge.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And understanding where the differences in the transitions are from configuration-oriented data to core master data to more of the transactional data elements, because the way those play into data conversion rules and iterative processing is important too. I maybe a little bit of a tangent, but I almost say when you're setting up, your approach to data conversion, your strategy, too oftentimes, even if people are using good tools in writing repeatable rules, so they've gotten away from the expert with the spreadsheet problem. Right. Even still, they can run into trouble if they try to orient all of the criterion and logic for what's active and where it needs to be set up or how in the new system to the legacy system. The legacy system is being replaced for a reason, right? And that reason probably isn't to just have a newer implementation with the same exact design as the old one.
Right. Yeah.
right? And a lot of times another mistake I'll see people make is kind of almost committing doublespeak. In one breath, they'll be talking about how horrible the quality and completeness and accuracy of the data is in the legacy system. But then in the next breath, they'll be soliciting from their business partners and their functional experts how to map this exact data element in the legacy system to the new system corresponding thing. It's like, why would you anchor your data for the new thing to what you just said was a horrible foundation in the old thing? But how that ties back to config versus master versus transactional, I found the best conversions really only care about the legacy system as it relates to the transactional data there. The transactional data there is where the business is running today and will up to the point of cutover.
Right.
So really the only and the most valuable thing you have from the legacy system is the transactional data cues that will be your criterion and tell you what is active today and why does that need to be active at any given point in time or not in your conversion. But then when it comes to the new master data, you want to anchor that to the functional understanding of the new target design, not try to wrangle and manipulate the old master data into the new master data. And that's where the flags come in that you mentioned. So
yes,
one of the things we've done in the past to be really successful in the data conversion is instead of driving rules off of existing legacy data elements, we drove them off of flags.
Okay.
So we sat down with business partners. We said, what's the most foundational buckets or segments or groupings of your master data, in particular material master, that matter but are mutually exclusive and collectively exhaustive?
Right.
Those things, those buckets or categories you can place your material masters into that are truly mutually exclusive and collectively exhaustive should be your base scenario flags.
Okay.
And then there's additional aspects of your materials where there could be multiple things that are true simultaneously, or there could be additional situations where in one situation a material will act one way or need to meet a certain need. In another scenario, it'll be a different situation. That doesn't change anything about the core scenario that's assigned to the material itself, but it's an important descriptor flag that needs to be noted about that material.
Yeah, love that. So just for those that might not have like the functional knowledge, describe a few scenarios before you keep going. Okay, just like what are some of the scenarios we're talking about?
Yeah, in SAP terms, it could be, your base scenario could be finished goods that are made in-house.
Okay.
Versus finished goods that are manufactured by a third-party contract manufacturer.
Okay. Right.
Versus semi-finished products that are made in-house or raw materials purchased from a third party. Right.
Perfect. Yeah, no, that's good.
So those are the base scenarios, mutually exclusive, collectively exhaustive. But then the additional descriptors might be is eligible for sales overseas or not. Okay. Completely made up. But if you think about that might be important to know for subsequent data targets and rules and reports, but it's not going to be exclusive to any one of those scenarios, right? And any one of the materials in the base scenarios we identified could qualify or not qualify for that flag. And just because they qualified for that particular descriptor flag, it would not preclude them from others, like is allowed to be sold domestically, is allowed to be sold as a semi-finished product or a non-finished good. And so if you put a lot of energy into getting the right flags that you can define and populate, now you kind of have compartmentalized or decoupled your data conversion situation.
So the next thing I want to ask you, Matt, is about we call them half-baked goods, right? Or it's materials that are in process of being set up during a migration. Can you deal with that in like an automated and pragmatic approach?
Absolutely. So sometimes we'll observe folks trying to exclude or treat those half-baked items or in process or new product setup, different names for the same thing. They'll try to treat those as a totally different cohort with a different path. And my opinion on that would be that it's a mistake. Yeah. Typically, I've had no problem if the core data migration targets are set up using the approaches and methods we've talked about. The same exact path works extremely well and actually better even for the half-baked, so-called half-baked goods. Because what happens is those come in, they'll meet the criterion of being active for some reason. In some instances in the past, there was even an active material criterion flag that was literally for half-baked goods. Right. Specifically because they wouldn't hit any of the other flags like has inventory, is on a manufacturing bomb, whatever yet. But we wanted them to be visible and be part of the process because then you can tell from your preload validation and quality reports how far along they really are, how well or not well they're covering the need in any given target, and exactly what's left to make them whole or fully realized codes. Gotcha. And that becomes very important as you draw closer to go live because you don't want to have a bunch of codes you're excluding and then trying to rehab through a special ad hoc process when you actually could have them through the same exact load process be as close as they possibly can be to being fully baked. Right. And then through your reporting know exactly what they're lacking and how to get it to fully realized. All the while you can very easily control them from being transactional or not transactional with key statuses right in the material master itself. Always think it's great to convert half-baked goods. Use the existing data quality reporting wrapped around your repeatable data migration targets to keep tabs on how good or not good those are. And it becomes a very transparent, effective way to have all the codes you need at Go Live and beyond, including the ones that didn't make it across the finish line before the cutover actually started.
Yeah, I love that, and I love that approach. And the other thing that I love, because I consider myself both business and IT, but probably more business than IT for sure. And what I love about this approach is it favors the business over the data team, right? So you're looking at how can we make this transition to a new system the easiest and the best for the business, instead of just throwing it over the wall saying, we're not dealing with half-baked goods, that's on you, figure it out, good luck, right? And then it's wide open, you got brand new system, people that don't understand the system trying to put it in, follow the rules, and it just turns into a huge mess.
Yeah, and that's a great point too, because it exactly right. If you do take that approach and you put it in the business's hands, the only experience they have, if they have any at all, is with setting up a new code in the old ERP system that you're replacing. Right. Even if they are right on top of it, they try their best, they get done, quote unquote, done quickly, you're almost guaranteed to go through multiple round trips before they get it right. And that journey to getting it right is going to involve, a lesson in every single default in data standard or requirement that those business partners haven't had to pay attention to through the project so far. And now they're going to be on a crash course with their new product launch hanging in the balance, right? Which is not good for anybody.
Yeah. The other thing I want our listeners to hear is, what would you say was kind of the average duration of the freeze period and any dual maintenance that we would kind of place on the business? What would you think back to the go live?
Oh my gosh! So there basically was no freeze period effectively, which will probably sound crazy to a lot of folks.
Right.
And it's much different than a lot of the project plans I've seen recently. But I can think of one conversion in specific where we basically froze data changes, I think like Friday, 5 p.m., like close of business on a Friday. And basically then at 5:15 was when the final extracts in target processing was kicked off for the data that would become the actual final conversion scope. And we had hundreds, if not thousands, of materials added and changed up till that last minute at 5 p.m. And it was totally fine because our tested and proven process for dealing with the extraction and the conversion worked exactly as designed, and it had been tested so many cycles. Absolutely. And again, it goes back to that theme of we didn't have to worry about what was different or changed and freak out about it because we had confidence in the process. Yes. We invested in the process instead of investing in the static list of materials at any given moment that mattered. And the process did the right thing and served that need beautifully. We did that particular conversion that I'm thinking of through the weekend. I think we had until Sunday to hand the system back and finished about 12 hours early, including a flawless standard costing run that tied out every single code that ended up in scope. This is scope that wasn't known until Friday, 5 p.m., mind you. Right. Every single code tied out to within 1 penny per thousand eaches on the first try in the standard cost roll with a successful business go live the following Monday.
I love it. And I know from personal experience and hearing it from the users that you set the gold standard at that company for the way a migration should be done. And let me just say to those that are watching you, or if you're a leader, a CIO, CEO, whatever, if somebody's asking you to freeze your data 3 months before go live, you've got the wrong people leading. There's a much better way to do that. And, get a hold of somebody like us. There's other folks out there. Syniti is another good example of that have great leaders in the marketplace that have done this, that know how to do it well, because you don't know what you don't know. And if you've not done a migration where you haven't allowed the business to be the business up until go live, you've not done it right. I'll just come and say you haven't done it right. You're missing out on a great opportunity. You're incurring a lot of cost and overhead and effort that you don't need to, that the migration team could take off the plate for you. So having said that, there's another approach that I really love how you've always handled, Matt, that's a delta load approach. Just explain a little bit of delta load and why that's so important. Yeah.
Delta loads are critical, and it's not just production. So anybody who's already familiar with the term delta load might only automatically think of that in like a production or a go live context, like to get the additional materials that weren't part of the first wave or the initial cutover. But what we always typically did was we supported and actively advocated for delta loads as well as change loads in every environment. Now, I personally consider a delta load to be both, right? Net new records that previously were not loaded into an environment, but now in today's execution of our data migration routines does meet our criterion and should have been there, right? So that's brand new, net new stuff that needs to be added to make it whole according to the latest active scope definition. But what also can happen is rules can change and evolve over time, or source data can change such that individual attributes could be evolving and changing over time, even if the core record that they live on was already identified and loaded in a previous load. So both the delta records and the change records aspect was something that we always tried to bake in so that at any given point in time, in any environment, on a routine basis, even if we weren't asked, we tried to do it on a regular basis. Basically, bring that current environment people are using up to the latest, greatest spec. And one amazing thing that does for the project and for the business is it gets everybody who's testing and validating and kicking the tires on that system in any particular cycle. It gets them using the data that you're actually converting and trying to validate your rules for.
Right.
Which then creates, if something's wrong or not right or perceived to be wrong, even if it is right, really doesn't matter. Either way, that's a very effective and valuable feedback loop to have, coming back to that quorum, that shared cadence and forum with the key stakeholders, right, to kind of realign on, okay, so-and-so says this is wrong. This came from your definition of a requirement for X, Y, or Z object. What are we going to say the right consensus answer is, and then bake that into the target. Now we've surfaced and we've aligned that potential showstopper issue before we even got to the next Delta load, let alone production or environment load, right? Let alone production load.
Absolutely.
That's super, super powerful. And that's kind of in contrast to if you take a different approach and you don't do those Delta loads, what happens? Well, the person that needs the data that's not there or expects the attributes to be better or different in a certain way the next time, they're going to find anyone they can with change access in that environment to go monkey with the data the way they think it should be next time.
Yes.
You're not going to know that or validate that that's going to actually be the case, but they're going to proceed with their testing, creating foregone conclusions or self-fulfilling prophecies, right? That are just nothing but rife for disappointment in the next full load when it looks the same as it did the last load and their process fails and they blame the data team. Now you have extra people fixing data in the next environment that would have never had to be involved above and beyond the person that had to manipulate the data in the first environment. And all the while, the data migration targets are no more close to the final state that they need to be when they started.
Yeah, no.
So there's a huge contrast there.
Yeah, there is. Yeah, and it's a little bit self-serving in that, on these projects, perception is reality, right? And so even if you've loaded a client and and if you don't have the latest design, if you don't have the latest thought around what that data should look like in that client, every time somebody logs in there, does a test, and they see, we'll call it crap data, they're going to be like, the data's crap, right? The data team doesn't know what they're doing. And so it is to the benefit of not only the testers, the business, but also the data team itself to keep the data in any of the active clients for testing, mock testing, integration testing, whatever it is, up to snuff with what the actual rules are. And one of our key tenets is we embrace change. Like as a project goes along, like we reserve the right to get smarter. And so as new requirements, as testing reveals a bad rule that has to be changed, it's like, yes, let's go, let's change it quickly, and let's get the clients that we are serving up to snuff with that data so that everybody that looks at it knows that we've got it.
Yeah. The worst inefficiency I've seen from not doing it that way is not only one but multiple duplicate defects.
Oh yeah.
For the same data gap that's already been fixed, continuing to get logged over and over again, and having to be addressed and updated and documented to close out the defect just because no one knows it's been fixed because the client hasn't been remediated or with a Delta load.
That's a great example. Yes.
who wants to work on resolving defects for problems that are already fixed, and who has time or budget for that? Right. So many reasons, kind of anchored to efficiency to do it our way that we've done in the past.
Absolutely. Okay, last topic. So I call this, when I'm talking as a risk partner or to different folks in executive levels, like the sleep at night medicine. How do you know if you've got it right? Like, how do you know that your material selection process is working correctly? Yeah.
Well, one is just sheer volume of attempts in experience and feedback, right? So the more cycles, the more confidence. But there's some really big, obvious, easy tells. One we already kind of mentioned a little bit in other conversation. It's the standard cost rule. There's a lot of stars that have to align in the data for the finance team to be able to successfully roll, mark, and release standard costs that match their expected standard values.
Right.
For the materials, and they know what that cost is supposed to be, and all your master data, as well as your bills of materials, your crewing rates, your labor rates, everything you can imagine has to be right and add up, along with the configuration for that outcome to tie out. So that's a huge, easy signal or beacon that you're either good or you're not good. Another could be forecast or planning runs that you could execute, right, and compare to the demand or supply network planning outputs in your current system. Are we in the same? Are we forecasting the same codes to the same degrees of volumes or not? Yeah. Are we suggesting or generating the same planned orders for the same reasons at the same manufacturing sites or not? If no, why not? Things like that, and then of course you always have the backstop of your reports, and that's a living, breathing exercise as well as you go through. So anytime you do one of these big feedback items like a cost roll, and you see something that maybe didn't go as you expected, this is in a lower environment very early, right, long before you ever get close to a go live. You also at the same time try to distill the learning or the crux of that gap back into yet again more validation reports, right? So by the time you actually get to the final processing iteration and the cutover data load, there's very little that you haven't already experienced, learned from, and built into a proactive validation in the target, which is going to tell you I'm good or I'm not good. And that becomes actually much more reliable and dependable than any one or multiple SMEs telling you the data is good or not good based on what they remember from all their experience of all these cycles.
Absolutely.
Right? I don't know about you,
that's good.
But even if I wanted to, there's no way I would be able to remember every nuance of everything I dealt with through the entire life cycle of a project.
Sure.
But if I had the discipline and the strategy of taking every one of those learnings and gaps and misses and turning that immediately into some kind of data quality report specifically for that item and documented in my conversion programs and routines, that becomes a very good, effective way of having good data and knowing in your knower that you have your good data for conversion. Right.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I always am impressed when I talk to you about your level of knowledge in data migration. I know if I am ever a CIO somewhere doing a data migration, I'm calling you. I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna talk to the board, do whatever it takes to get you on the team. So, no, really appreciate your time, Matt. Appreciate your expertise. I hope for those that have taken the time to listen that you are taking notes. And if you have any other questions, head us up in the comments. Check out alljoydata.com. There's an easy way for you to get a free consultation where we can try to point you in the right direction if you need help. But Matt, thanks again. God bless, and we'll see y'all next round.
Thanks, Bill. Thanks, everyone. Good luck. Happy migrations.
Yeah, right.